A lot of the political and religious buzz that you hear today is about H.R.5, what's known as the Equality Act. And so I want to talk today about this a little bit because it's so important for us as Christians and most Americans really to understand what is in this bill. Now, you can go out on YouTube and you can see all kinds of videos about people who are telling you how this is going to affect you, women's sports and locker rooms and all those kinds of things. But I want to take a little bit of a different approach in this video. And I actually want to go through this bill and look at what it actually says. Of course, we can't go through the whole thing because it's kind of long, and this might be a little bit of a longer video anyway. But I just want to look at some select parts to give you an idea from the bill itself, what it says, and then a little bit of how it applies to our lives. So what is it, and how does it affect us? We're going to actually look at this bill now, and here it is. It's H.R.5. This is actually the printout from the bill, so you can actually see it yourself and read some things along with me. We're just going to go through this a little bit. First, when we get down here to page 3, and I highlighted some of these things for my own benefit and for your benefit too. On page 3, and starting in line 1 there, it gives the reasons for the Equality Act. And this is what it says. Discrimination can occur on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, pregnancy, childbirth, or a related medical condition of an individual, as well as because of sex-based stereotypes. Each of these factors alone can serve as the basis for discrimination, and each is a form of sex discrimination. So you can see right off the bat, it's starting off with a subtle definition that might be different than what you usually think of. You usually think of sex as male and female, right? What your gender is. But immediately you see here, and the purpose for this is they are adding in sexual orientation and gender identity. It's the new definition of sex, and it's going to go on and describe that in great detail. And this is the primary issue with this bill. It's taking sex and including the definition of sexual orientation and gender identity. That's the primary purpose of it. What is sexual orientation? Sexual orientation is defined as the innate sexual attraction that you have for other people, whether you're attracted to males or females or whatever in today's world, right? It's not binary anymore. It's not just male and female. There's all kinds of genders out there in people's opinion. And so it's whoever you're attracted to. And gender identity is who you feel you are. If whether inside you perceive that you are male, or you perceive that you're female, or you perceive that you are some mixture or nothing, or you come up with some other gender, that's what gender identity is. So you have to understand those two definitions as you go through this. So let's keep looking at this, because this, I think, is very dangerous right here. I'm going to share with you, and this is down on page 5. And it concerns the practice known as conversion therapy. Now, what conversion therapy is when you go to someone and you say, I'm not comfortable with my gender. You know, anatomically, I'm a male, but inside I feel like I'm a female. And that person then will try to help you get used to the idea that you are an anatomical male. Okay, that is what conversion therapy is. And it's called conversion therapy because what these people say is if you come to me as a pastor and I try to help you understand, yes, you're a boy. That's the way God made you, and it's okay. I'm trying to convert you from what you really are as a woman inside, even though you look like a man outside. That's why it's called conversion therapy. Look at what this says. The discredited practice known as conversion therapy is a form of discrimination that harms LGBTQ people by undermining individuals' sense of self-worth, increasing suicide ideation and substance abuse, exacerbating family conflict, and contributing to second-class status. In other words, according to this bill, you better not try to talk somebody out of gender dysphoria. If there's a boy who feels like a girl, you better celebrate the fact that this is now a girl and no longer a boy, because according to the Equality Act, this person should be celebrated because they don't know who they are on the inside because it's changing. So basically what it's telling you here is that gender is an emotional construct rather than a biological fact. It's not like you can look at a child and say, oh, this is obviously a boy or this is obviously a girl, like the doctors do when you're born or when they do on the ultrasounds. You have to find out what you are inside. That's the fundamental purpose behind this bill, which is one of the reasons why it's so dangerous. I mean, this is ludicrous. 100 years ago, if you would have talked like that, what would people have thought of you? They probably would have locked you up in a bin somewhere. You're crazy to think something like that. Well, now here's a bill with this as its fundamental thought process, and it passed the House of Congress already. It passed the House of Representatives in the last week or so, and then it'll be headed to the Senate. And of course, the president will sign it if it gets past the Senate. That's the kind of people that we're dealing with today in our government. So this act goes down to the provisions. The provisions, of course, are to include sex as gender or as sexual orientation and gender identity. It's changing the definition of sex. So let's see how this works. At first, what I want to do is I actually want to go over to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 because I want you to see how they're going to change it. So here it is right here. This is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And let me grab it here. Title 2, Section 201 there, it says, all persons shall be entitled to full and equal employment of goods, services, facilities, and privileges, advantages, and accommodations of any place of public accommodation, as defined in this section, without discrimination or segregation on the ground of race, color, religion, or national origin. So you cannot discriminate against people because of their color, religion, race, or national origin. That is what the Civil Rights Act was all about. Well, now we're going to get into the Equality Act, which amends the Civil Rights Act, and this is how it does it. This is one of the ways that it does it right here. Let me get it up. I'm trying to shut it down on myself. There we go. Going to actually go down to page 14. There's so much in here. I would just love to talk about it all, but we can't do that for sake of time. Excuse me as I just scroll through here. Page 14. Here we go. This is how it's going to be changed. Look here in line 5. Well, line 4 talks about how it's going to be updating Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's amended this way. In subsection A, by inserting sex, including sexual orientation and gender identity, before, quote, or national origin, end quote. And so it's adding to this list of protected classes sex, but not just sex, because we all know you shouldn't discriminate against someone based on the fact that it's a man or a woman, but it's defining it as sexual orientation and gender identity. And this happens all through the Equality Act. It's everywhere in the Equality Act. In most of the titles, this is the purpose for the Equality Act, to define sex as sexual orientation and gender identity. So now it would become a protected class should this pass. And so both the Civil Rights Act and the Equality Act talk about places of public accommodation. And this is important because when we read on here, and start right here in line 8, where it starts to amend the Civil Rights Act even more concerning places of public accommodation, which are just places like hotels, restaurants, theaters, stadiums, things like that are places where public can go and get services. Well, the Equality Act wants to further define that and bringing many more things into the scope, so there's no question about these are places of public accommodation. So starting here on line 9, right there, it says in paragraph 3 of the Civil Rights Act, by striking stadium and all that follows, and then inserting stadium or other place of or establishment that provides exhibition, entertainment, recreation, exercise, amusement, public gathering, or public display. And then it goes on after a couple of other things there in line 19. Any establishment that provides a good, service, or program, including a store, shopping center, online retailer, or service provider, salon, bank, gas station, food bank, service or care center, shelter, travel agency, or funeral parlor, or establishment that provides health care, accounting, or legal services. So this obviously is a concern to many businesses because there are so many things that are included in this. And just the list goes on and on. It's like they just wanted to make sure they could include anything that possibly could be a place of public accommodation. Now we understand, I believe, and I think probably most of you also would believe, that we should not reject serving someone just because it's an LGBTQ person. But that's not the point. Most people that this comes up with are people that aren't wanting to celebrate the fact that that person is LGBTQ or whatever. For example, Jack Phillips from Masterpiece Cake Shop out in Colorado, he refused to bake and design a wedding cake for a gay wedding. Now, he told them, you can buy anything else in here. That's fine. You can, we'll let you buy all this, whatever I've already made. But this particular cake, I'm not going to design it for your wedding. Now, the Equality Act is going to say, no, that is discrimination. Obviously, Jack Phillips was sued. He had a whole big thing because of that. And he's not the only one. This stuff is happening all the time. But this Equality Act is trying to ensure that no business can get away with this. And it brings all these places in. Now, this poses, I believe, a big problem for churches. And the big problem is that, well, churches are not considered places of public accommodation. Generally, the line can become very fuzzy, especially if you were to rent out your building. Like, say you're going to rent out your gymnasium or something like that. It's very carefully, and we need to really make sure it's carefully worded in our doctrinal, or in our constitutions and our actual paperwork of our church, that it is not a place of public accommodation. But you can see in these definitions here of places of public accommodation, it includes terms like public gathering, a place where public gathers. Well, that's kind of what happens in a church, right? I know technically we're supposed to be exempt from this, but public gather here. Can you see how this could be used against churches when churches stand up against the LGBTQ movement and don't allow LGBTQ people to join their church or become leadership or whatever? So public gathering. It also specifically singles out where a service or program is provided. Now, that's what happens in churches all the time. We provide services. There's programs for people. And another concerning thing to me, and I don't know if anyone else has picked up on this or not, but it also brings in the term funeral parlor. Now, we understand to a degree how that would be, but you just have to wonder if at some point a church would be considered a funeral parlor when a funeral is held in the building. Many times they bring the body to the church. You actually have the service there. And could somebody sue a church for say, not letting a man use the women's bathroom at a funeral service in the church? So you can see how this gets to be a tightrope here that we have to kind of walk on. If this were to pass, we can see how they're really trying to push an agenda here. There's no question. It's not even trying to be hidden anymore. It's blatant in this Equality Act, trying to push the agenda, trying to get the American people not just to accept the LGBTQ and transitioning lifestyle, but to endorse it, to celebrate it, to make it normal and everybody else abnormal. You can see how that works out here. Now, another thing that's concerning to me is when you talk about an establishment, we think of an establishment as a business, Walmart, or maybe the funeral parlor down the street, or a gas station. But this Equality Act takes the idea of establishment and doesn't just apply it to a business, but to an individual. Look here on page 15. We're going to skip down here to line 13, where it says rule of construction. It says, a reference in this title to an establishment shall be construed to include an individual whose operations affect commerce and who is a provider of a good, service, or program, and shall not be construed to be limited to a physical facility or place. And so the Civil Rights Act would be amended according to this Equality Act, not just for businesses, but for any person who provides any kind of a service that helps commerce. In other words, if you do anything and you are seen to be guilty of discrimination against somebody because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, you will be breaking the law. I hope you can see how this is kind of scary. It's very scary. It's very concerning to me. And it should be to all Christians, and not even just Christians, but to people all over the place. It should be very concerned about this. Moving on now to another way that the Civil Rights Act, Title 11 this time is amended, and this is a part of the Civil Rights Act that is called miscellaneous. Title 11 is just miscellaneous. They do things, and one of the ways one of the things they do is they define things. So skipping down to verse, I keep wanting to say verse. This is not the Bible we're reading here. Pardon me for skipping down so fast here, but I'm going down to page 22, and you can download this thing on the internet, and you can read it for yourself. Look at this. Here we're defining terms, okay? The term race, color, religion, sex, including sexual orientation and gender identity, or national origin used with respect to an individual includes. Now we're going to go into a further definition of what this means, sex and sexual orientation, gender identity. Lest anyone be confused, what exactly does it mean? Line 5 there. It says the race, color, religion, sex, and we got added it again, including sexual orientation and gender identity or national origin, respectively, of another person with whom the individual is associated or has been associated. And so basically all that is saying is, it's really very simple, but it's saying that when it says you can't discriminate against sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, that is discriminating against the other person in your relationship, like your customer. You can't discriminate on that person. It's not saying, oh, this is a general thing. It's just saying that person's sex. If that person comes in and thinks they're a boy when they look like a girl, you can't discriminate against that. That's simply all that is saying in my understanding. But look as we continue on in line 10 here. We're defining sexual orientation and gender identity, okay? It says a perception or belief, even if inaccurate, concerning the race, color, religion, sex, including sexual orientation and gender identity or national origin, respectively, of the individual. Do you understand what that's saying? It's saying you can't discriminate against somebody. It doesn't matter what their actual gender is or anything. It's whatever they think, even if it's wrong. Now, that's curious to me because obviously they understand that there is man and there is woman, and some people think they're the opposite and they're inaccurate. But it says right here, they don't even have to be right. It can be totally inaccurate. In other words, you can make it up on the spot. Oh, today I'm a woman. You can't discriminate against me. I mean, that is just ludicrous, but they're trying to make this the law of the United States of America. I never thought, maybe I did think I would see this, but I didn't think I would see this early. Okay, I didn't think I would see this when all my hair isn't yet gray. I mean, this is moving so fast, it's crazy. This is actually moving from the evil to the insane, in my opinion. It's crazy, but don't discriminate against someone for what they say, and they don't even have to be right about it. Can you believe this is actually in a bill that Congress passed, and the Senate will probably be taking up very soon. So it doesn't take a lot of imagination really to see where this whole thing is headed. I want to move on now to page 23, the next page. Because one of the things you hear a lot is, well, this is going to allow men in the girls' bathroom and locker rooms and all that. Is that true? Or is that just right-wing conspiracy trying to turn everybody against this Equality Act, right? Look here on page 23. In verse, there I go again. Page 23, and you can tell I teach the Bible, right? Page 23, line 16. Says, with respect to gender identity, an individual shall not be denied access to a shared facility, including a restroom, a locker room, and a dressing room that is in accordance with the individual's gender identity. What can I say? It's right there. They already said that you don't actually have to be a man or a woman. You can be totally wrong about it. And you cannot discriminate against this person. If this boy says that he is a girl, then you can't do anything about it, even if he's inaccurate and it's obvious he's inaccurate. So this is what it means. This is the law. We're not making this stuff up. It's not the law yet, but I'm sure one day it probably will be. So you have this boy who wants to go into the locker room with your daughter in school, wants to go into the showers, wants to see your daughter unclothed, and you can't do anything about it, or you are a bigot. Now, how does that make you feel, fathers? How does that make you feel, mothers? This boy can decide that he's a girl so he can go in there and see your daughter unclothed. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is pure evil. And if you voted for somebody in the last election who voted for this thing, you need to do some serious thinking about yourself, okay? You need to do some serious thinking about how your vote actually matters. And they call this the Equality Act, right? And you hear this all the time. It's the Inequality Act. And really it is, because, boy, these girls sure aren't getting very equal treatment in this, are they? Now they have to go into a locker room, into a bathroom, and there might be a man in there who claims for the day that he's a woman, so he can go in there and see a girl. This is not equal to women. This is demeaning to women. In fact, there are non-Christian women, feminists, who say, we cannot allow this bill because this is so unequal to women. We're the bigots if we don't recognize that you should be allowing this man into the women's bathroom or locker room or shower room or whatever. This is just absolutely crazy. Something else that this does is it applies to shelters. This bill specifically, if you were to go back and look on page 14 in line 22, it specifically applies to shelters. So you have these women who come off the street and maybe they've been abused and maybe they have a child or they're pregnant, and you put them in, you can't have a girls' shelter anymore. You have to let a guy come in if he feels like he's a woman. Today I'm a woman, and now there'll be one cot here. A few feet over, there'll be a cot. There's a woman on one who's been battered, who's been in an abusive relationship, who's been raped, and now she's got this man on the next cot. And don't say this is just far right-wing conspiracy. This is what the bill actually says. You can actually download it and read the thing for yourself. And another thing we hear about is women's sports. Well, obviously, you have to allow a man who feels like a woman into women's sports, and this is And this is unfair. And all these women, there are stories, you can listen to them. You can listen to people talk about this. Their girls train, and they train because they want to get a scholarship. And then some guy comes in, says he's a girl, and he beats them out in track and field or whatever. It's totally unfair to women. This is just totally ridiculous. And we need to contact the people who are voting on these things and say, look, this does not represent doesn't represent people. This hurts women. It hurts churches. It hurts people who just want to stand up for what I consider to be biblical morals. So there's more I could say about that for length of time, sake of time. We're not going to get too much into it. But one more thing that this does affect is abortion. Now we hear about this, abortion. How does it affect abortion? Well, you can go into find videos on YouTube or somewhere that really go into this in more detail. But basically, remember, one of the descriptions of places of public accommodation refers specifically to healthcare facilities. A healthcare facility is a place of public accommodation. And I want to show you this from page 23, lines 1. Look at the very top there. It says, pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical condition. This is included in the whole, look at there, sex. Sex includes a sex stereotype, and pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical condition. So when you can't discriminate against sex, it also means you can't discriminate against pregnancy or a related medical condition. What do you think a related medical condition that's related to pregnancy and childbirth might possibly be? Maybe abortion? You can't discriminate against abortion. Someone walks in and they say, I want an abortion. You say, well, I don't believe in abortion. We don't provide them here. That's discrimination based on sex. What do you mean that's discrimination based on sex? I'm not discriminating against you because you're a woman or because you're a man. No, you're discriminating based on the Equality Act's definition of sex, which includes related medical conditions to childbirth. I mean, this is just crazy. We can put anything we want other definition of sex. And so you can see how this is going to be promoting abortion even more. Well, you might say, well, wait a minute. I'm a Christian doctor. I'm not going to do it. I have the First Amendment, right? I have my religious liberty. I have my religious freedom. I have RFRA. You know what RFRA is? RFRA is the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, signed by President Clinton in 1993. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA, effectively prohibits federal and state governments from substantially burdening a person's exercise of religion, except when there is a compelling government interest involved. So in other words, the government cannot step in the way of you doing what your religion requires you to do unless there's some big reason, compelling government reason to do it. And so you say, well, I'm protected here from RFRA because my religion, my belief in God, I can't I can't perform abortions. Oh, wait a minute here. Look at this. Page 25, line 4. I want you to see this because it really shows what these people are up to here. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993 shall not provide a claim concerning or a defense to a claim under a covered title or provide a basis for challenging the application or enforcement of a covered title. What do we have here? We have a law that these people are trying to pass that says you have no more religious liberty. Folks, that was the First Amendment to our Constitution. That is what America is built on. Religious freedom. And even if you go through history, you see, we are supposed to be free religious people. But when it comes to the LGBTQ issue and other things that are talked about in this bill, forget your religious freedom. You no longer have any. You have to bow down and worship at the LGBTQ life's idol or altar. You have to do that according to this bill. I hope you can see how absolutely dangerous this is. And there's so much more we could say about this bill, but for sake of time, we're going to end it here. I hope you read it. I hope you understand it. And I hope you get an idea now how dangerous this bill actually is. Contact your senators and tell them do not vote on this bill. And next time you go to vote for somebody, make sure you vote for somebody who's got some common sense and who's got some standards. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel, like my videos, comment what you think about this. God bless you guys, and I'll see you next time, hopefully with some better news. God bless.